Do you need a recording console for your home studio or your recording studio? Is it possible to have a recording studio without a console? You know, when I first set up this facility, I didn't have a console. One of the first questions that lots of people ask would be, what's your console? I went with the SSL XL Desk. Spoiler, I don't think you necessarily do need a console. I think you can achieve loads without one. There's some really cool things that you can do with a console, or even just a little mixer. So I'm going to talk through some of that now and reasons that you might actually want to get something. It doesn't have to be something as fancy as this. The XL Desk is amazing. Obviously there's much fancier consoles than this as well. As consoles go, this is kind of cheap-ish. I think a Neve 88RS would set you back more than my house is worth. These are about 15k unloaded, and then you put in what you need, which is obviously it's an astronomical amount of money to spend on a bit of recording equipment, but this is kind of what I do, so I love it. Got another little console to look at here, which is definitely worth considering, which is the SSL SiX. I actually had this before I bought this, and having this is what convinced me that I should invest in a proper console. I also brought in this little Allen and Heath Z series thing, which is pretty cool, to be honest with you. It's pretty ace. This generally lives under the seat in my van for gigging, and it's just a spare desk. Should probably be normalised, how naughty. That we use just in case if the main desk on the gig goes down. This is just there to mean that we can finish the job and get paid. So you might be saying to yourself, why on earth do you need a console? I just mix in the box and I don't really need any fancy gear to do that. I can get just as good a sound with, you know, some Waves plugins, the Slate stuff, the UAD stuff. And you're absolutely right, you can. The reason that I got a console was more to do with recording than it was mixing, although I do use it for mixing all the time now, which was something that I hadn't thought that I would do. I thought I would just use it for recording and then I would just mix in the box all the time. That hasn't happened. I kind of mix in hybrid. I've done a couple of videos about that here. I'm happy to do more about the way that I use it for mixing. So the first thing that I got, I mean, I've had little mixers around for gigging. I mean, I've had much bigger mixers than this little Allen Heath one here, and I've got an X32 as well that we use for gigging, which is like a digital console. One of the things that it gives me is flexibility when tracking. It means, for example, if I'm using some of these preamps, these outboard preamps, I can control the level to Pro Tools. Now you might be thinking, well, isn't that what the gain knob does? And on a really clean preamp, yeah, it does. But on something like a Neve 1073, which is what these are, the clones of Neve 1073s, the gain actually adds quite a lot of saturation to the sound. And then if you're going to EQ something, that adds its own thing as well. And that adds gain as well. If you boost, that's going to add gain. So it allows me to control the level to Pro Tools separately to controlling how much saturation comes from the preamps. These Cappy preamps actually have channel faders on them. Brilliant. And these ones have a trim, but you can see that, like, you know, if you were trimming it here and then looking at Pro Tools, trimming it here, you know, it's really cool having it just on a fader and you can control the level to Pro Tools. The first thing that I used to do this was this little SSL SiX, which is absolutely cracking. Honestly, if you've been thinking about getting an SSL SiX or that big SiX one, just, you know, if you can afford it, get it. It's absolutely brilliant. I mean, I still have this here. I still use it occasionally. The channel compressors on it are brilliant. I've done some content about it when I first got it. I'll put some things here. I think I did some videos, it's a long time ago. I think I did some videos about the channel compressors. The EQ is really usable. I can do some videos comparing these if that is useful to anybody. And it just gives lots and lots of versatility to your routing. It means that if you've got a few pieces of outboard that you want to record through, it's easy enough to patch them through. And it also makes it easy to record parallels, which is something that I'm massively into. There's a thing particularly when tracking drums, if you want to get a parallel snare drum or kick snare, so something that's been compressed, so you could use some parallel compression at the same time. If you track it at the same time, it is perfectly in phase. And my experience of doing it with plugins is that it hasn't always been perfectly in phase. And sometimes I'll close Pro Tools and open Pro Tools, and because it recalculates the delay compensation every time it closes it and reopens it, I think, it sounds slightly different. Now, it could be just me going mad because, you know, I am old now, but it isn't. I can definitely hear it. Now, if you're coming out of the audio interface into the desk, as long as you're on the same converter, it's been perfectly in phase. But I found that if you come out of the ADAT output, that again isn't perfectly lined up. It's not sample perfect. So anyway, recording parallels is brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic way to change your recording techniques. And what we do for that, say if we let's just do it on this little desk here. So an easy enough way to do it on this little desk here would be that you come in. Now, the preamps on this desk aren't amazing, but you could come in on a line input from your nice preamp, and then the main outputs could go to your audio interface. And then you could use one of the auxiliaries. You could use the auxiliary output, and you could send that auxiliary to a compressor if you've got like an 1176 or something like that. If you've got some compressors, or even, like a guitar pedal or something, you might have a cool little pedal that you wanted to record, and then you can print that to a different track and record it at the same time. Or say if you might have like a cool reverb pedal or something, a guitar pedal, you could record that at the same time as well and get a separate feed of that recording. A little desk like this is possibly okay. I've tried the USB output of this. It was noisy and horrendous and it didn't sound good. I think, even the cheapest of the 2 input audio interfaces that you get are better quality than the audio interfaces on this by a long way. It stands to reason, really. I mean, this does so much, doesn't it? A great little desk, this, for if you just have like some little solo gigs or just something where you only need a few. As I say, I use it as a spare desk for gigs because if my X32 goes down, I still want to be able to get paid. It, of course, gives you some analog EQ as well. Now, something like the SSL SiX, there's just 2 channels that have the EQ. But the EQ that's on it's awesome. It's really great. And you can have a lot of fun experimenting with that. And ultimately, the more fun you can make your recording, the better. There's some other cool little things with a console generally, which is that it does your monitoring section. Being able to switch between different speakers is really useful and it's a really cool thing to do. There's a cool little device that I had before I had the SSL, which is this little PreSonus monitor station, which I actually still use as a headphone amp because it's great. It's really clean. I don't usually like anything that PreSonus makes, but this is brilliant. The talkback functions on it. So if you had like a little setup where you were just doing some tracking, maybe in your home studio, and you set somebody up downstairs in the living room, to be able to just use like a quick talkback thing to be able to speak to those people, just it really elevates the session and makes it run more smoothly and more effectively. And that's something that's included on most large consoles as well. There's nearly always a talkback section. I've seen some people using digital consoles in their studios, which is quite a cool idea, really. The only thing that I've seen as a drawback to a digital console from the friends of mine who I know who use them is that sometimes you're a little bit limited on the sample rate choices. I know with the X32 range, you're limited to 44.1 or 48K. Now, some clients, they want to record at 96, the jury's out, but you can't do it with that. And then the Allen and Heath consoles, to the best of my understanding, they can only do 48K or 96K. So you can't do anything in 44.1, which means that you can't really like master something for CD using that console. The preamps on these things are really cool. They're great sounding. I mean, they're not as good as, say, the preamps on a more expensive console or some, you know, there's lots of availability of outboard stuff. You can get some really great stuff now for a reasonable price. But they are good and they're absolutely usable as a thing, with the added benefit, say if you've got an X32 and you have one anyway because you use it for gigging or for some work like that, then the X32 can double up as a control surface as well, which is quite cool. Because my console is completely analog, I invested in an Avid S1 as well as a control surface. Quite cool getting into like the little 500 series things. There's it's quite a big availability these days of DIY 500 series modules that you can buy. So once you've got yourself the power supply and you can build stuff up. Now, I mean, obviously, you know, I've got quite a lot of stuff in here, but a lot of this stuff, like this rack here, you know, I just bought this power supply and one preamp to start with, and then like the next time I had enough money, I bought the next preamp, and then these ones were kits that I've built. These are kits that I've built, and you can see that there's spaces for more stuff that I'm going to build eventually when I get enough money to do it. You know, I've kind of got a plan in my mind of what I want to do. These are going to go in there. There's going to be more preamps. I want 8 Neves and then 6 Cappies. That's the idea. Mixing in the box is still absolutely great, and you can get just as good a sound, obviously. You know, if Andrew Sheps can do it in the box, then, you know, why wouldn't he use a console, seeing as he had one? If he felt that he needed to use a console, he'd have just done it. So there's no excuse, really. But my mixes definitely sound better since I've been running them through the console, and it's given me the flexibility to be able to have some master bus processing that I really like using. Now, I use the bus compressor on the SSL. I use these Rupert Neve Designs things, and I tend to use some preamps on the master bus as well. So I either use my Cappies or I use these AML Neve clones. I just find that gives me a little bit more depth to the sound, which, you know, I really like that. And actually, I think it just gets the mix there faster, which I think when I mix faster, my mixes tend to be better. I think the faster I can get it done, actually the less I mess around in my mind, and the quicker I get to the vision. And I suppose that my ears don't get tired so quickly as well. So if I record it correctly and I mix it quickly and efficiently, that tends to be what gets me what I consider to be a better sound here. If you get something like the SSL SiX as well, there is a little bus compressor in this. I've been thinking about doing maybe some videos comparing the bus compressor in this to the G series that's in the console to maybe some plugins. I've got the UAD one, I've got the Waves one, I think. No, maybe I don't have the Waves one. I've definitely got the UAD one. I've got the Slate one, so I can compare those easily enough if that'd be something that people would find useful. Let me know in the comments below. Yeah, cool. So hopefully I haven't ruffled too many feathers. If you want to get a console and you can afford it, I would say go for it. It's one of the best things I ever did with my money, really. So outside of my car and my house, it's the most expensive thing I've ever bought in my life. It was a big commitment to make, and it's been a continual big commitment, particularly because I bought the one with the 500 series slots. And that has meant that, you know, I bought it unloaded, and then any time that I've been paid from anything, I've invested in more gear for the studio. So pretty much all my money that I get that is spare, in inverted commas, and maybe a little bit that isn't spare, gets spent on the studio. And that's been a massive commitment, but it's not something that I regret. I love doing this. I love music in general, and I love messing with stuff. I feel very lucky to be able to do it for a job. It's brilliant. Cool. Please do like the video. Please do subscribe to the channel. If you want content on anything, just let me know.